All right, guys. Today we are discussing um, special right triangles. We're going to use special right triangles to find lengths in particular right triangles and use real life problems involving special right triangles. And the word we only have one word again, which is an isosceles triangle. We should know what that is at this juncture. But this as a reminder, a triangle with two equal sides and the angles opposite those sides are also equal. So take a moment to write that down. All right, so the first of our special right triangles is a 45, 45, 90 triangle. It is an isosceles triangle, and it can be formed by cutting a square in half. Say, for instance, we have this square, all of our sides. Our X, that marker is awesome. We have X and X here. All right, we know since it is a square, all the sides are equal, X and X, and to find the hypotenuse. To find what that hypotenuse measures, we can still use the Pythagorean theorem to find it. So we have x squared plus x squared equals 2x squared. Okay, and so we take the square root of 2x squared. Square root of x squared is just x. And we can't test the side x times the square root of 2. So when you have a 45, 45, 90 triangle, legs are some measure. They are the same since it is an isosceles triangle. And your hypotenuse is going to be multiplying x or whatever that leg measure is by the square root of 2. So if it's 5, your hypotenuse would be 5 square root of 2. If it's 10, your hypotenuse would be 10 square root of 2. So taking whatever value the legs are and multiplying it by the square root of 2. That is in fact what we're doing. The hypotenuse is square root of 2 times as long as each leg. All right. Now, if we know the hypotenuse, we can find the leg by dividing by the square root of 2. Since we find the hypotenuse by multiplying by the square root of 2, we can find each leg by dividing by the square root of 2. So let's look at these examples. In A, we have a leg as 8, and we're trying to find the hypotenuse. Again, as a reminder, the hypotenuse is always your longest side, and it's always across from the right angle. So if I know my leg is 8, I just simply, to find x, we know x equals the leg times the square root of 2. We know our leg is 8, so x equals 8 square root of 2. Simple. This next example, we know the hypotenuse, okay? So we know our hypotenuse is 5 square root of 2. We know that x times the square root of 2. So like I said, to find a leg from the hypotenuse in a 45, 45, 90 triangle, you just simply divide by the square root of 2. And we know x equals 5. All right, in this last example, again, we know the hypotenuse is 10 square root of 2. That should actually be just the 10 here. So let me scratch that out. All right, so let's say our hypotenuse is 10. How do we find it if it's 10? Well, again, we know that our hypotenuse equals x times the square root of 2. And again, if you know the hypotenuse, divide by the square root of 2 to find your leg. And this is just me doing that same thing algebraically. So if you want to say, if you can remember to just, if you're given your hypotenuse, just divide by the square root of 2. It's easy. So yeah, x equals 10 divided by the square root of 2. Now, we should know that we can't have a radical in the denominator. So what we do to rationalize the denominator is you multiply by that denominator. So you're going to multiply the top and bottom by the square root of 2. That's going to equal 10 times the square root of 2 over the square root of 4. And we know the square root of 4 is just 2. And we can simplify 10 over 2 as 5 square root of 2. Now back to this rationalizing of the denominator. There's a lot of ways you can look at the square root of 2 times the square root of 2. The square root of 2 times the square root of 2. The reason why we multiply by itself is that it cancels out the radical. So this, like we saw initially, was the square root of 4, or it's also equal to the square root of 2 squared. And before we learned that when you square a square root, it cancels out the radical. You get 2 here, you also get 2 here. So no matter which way you look at it, you're going to get 2, and that's the whole point. We multiply by that radical is to get rid of the radical in the denominator. So take a moment to do these 3 problems in your notes on your own, and we'll go over them shortly. All right, looking at this first one, we know we're trying to find x, and we know that the hypotenuse is 2 square root of 2. Again, hypotenuse of a 45, 45, 90 triangle equals x times the square root of 2. Divide by the square root of 2, and you get x is 2. Number 2, we are given both of the legs as the square root of 2. So we know y equals the legs times the square root of 2. So y equals square root of 2 times the square root of 2. So y equals 2. And then the third problem here, we have the hypotenuse as 8. We know the hypotenuse, again, in a 45, 45, 90 triangle equals x times the square root of 2. Or again, if you can remember to just simply divide by the square root of 2, that would be your answer. But then again, we know we can't leave the answer that way. So we multiply or rationalize the denominator, get 8 square root of 2 over 2, simplify that fraction for square root of 2. All right, so our other special right triangle is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. A 30, 60, 90 triangle is a right triangle that can be formed by cutting an equilateral triangle in half. All right, so we have this equilateral triangle. We know that the angle measures in each angle in the equilateral triangle is 60. But if we were to, I'm going to have to remove this paper, but the flyer is going to come back. And it is back. All right, so we have cut this in half. All right, this bisects this angle, making it 30 degrees. Okay, and let's say each measure was 4 before. All right, since we're cutting it in half, we know this is 2. All right, our hypotenuse is twice what the short leg is. And to find our long leg, we, give me a second, we use Pythagorean theorem, or minus, since the hypotenuse is minus 2 squared. equals, let's see, that's 16 minus 4, which would be 12. Take the square root of 12. And now we can factor that to 4 times 3. So that's 2 times the square root of 3. So remember, like in a 45, 45, 90 triangle, to find the hypotenuse, it was x times the square root of 2. Here, our x is 2. To find our long leg, we multiply it by the square root of 3. So notice that our hypotenuse is twice as long as our shortest leg. Again, and then the long leg is square root of 3 times as long as our shortest leg. So the 30, 60, 90 triangle, hypotenuse is twice as long as the shorter leg, and the longer leg is square root of 3 times as long as the shortest leg. So if I know what my short leg is, to find the hypotenuse, multiply by 2. To find the long leg, multiply by the square root of 3. If I know my hypotenuse, I divide by 2 to find my short leg, which then will help me find my longer leg, and so on and so forth. To find the short leg, and I know the long leg, divide by the square root of 3. So let's look at this example. Put this back up. Yeah. Put this fire out. So I have the long leg of a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So I know that this long leg is 9. So let's find what our short leg is. We know the long leg equals x times the square root of 3. Again, if I know my long leg and I want to find the short leg, I just divide by the square root of 3. And I get 9 over the square root of 3 equals x. Can't leave it like that. Remember, we have to rationalize the denominator. So you multiply by the square root of 3 at the top or bottom. Get 9 square roots of 3 over 3. We can simplify this fraction. We know that x equals 3 times the square root of 3. Now, to find our hypotenuse, since we know this is our short leg, we know y is 2 times whatever our short leg is. 2 times our short leg here is x. We know what x is, so y equals 2 times 3 square roots of 3, which is 6 square root of 3. Simple enough. So take a moment to try to figure out these 4 problems. Now, remember, to find area, the area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. Let's look at this first triangle. We know the short leg is square root of 3. To find the long leg, you just multiply by the square root of 3. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 is 9, which is just 3. All right, the second one. We have a equilateral triangle, and we're trying to find the height of that triangle. We know our base is 2, and the height, or the long leg, of half of this 30, 60, 90 triangle. So notice, again, we should notice that this is an equilateral triangle. We cut it in half, so it makes 2 30, 60, 90 triangles. And we're trying to find the height, which is reflexive, is the height for both of these triangles. We know that our base, our x, equals 2. We know h equals x times the square root of 3. So the height equals 2 times the square root of 3. Which is, all right, and the last one, we know the longest leg. So remember, we know the longest leg. We can simply divide by the square root of 3. This is exactly like the last example. I don't know how. I got the same problem. I'm going to work it out anyway. So 9 square root of 3 over 3. Remember, we got to multiply by the square root of 3. So x equals 3 square root of 3. Now, this problem here, find the area of triangle DEF, round decimal, answers to the nearest 10. Okay, so we have this triangle. Now this angle is 30 degrees, and we see that this angle is 90. Both of these angles are 90. So this means this one has to be 60, and this one has to be 60. So we know this is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. We know the long leg, okay? So we can use this long leg to find the height or the short leg of this triangle, this smaller triangle. We see the long leg is 7 square root of 3. So we can simply divide by the square root of 3, and we see that this is 7. The short leg is 7, and the hypotenuse is twice what that is. So 2 times 7 is 14. Okay, so now we know the hypotenuse of the longer triangle is 28. Or the larger triangle is 28. So the short leg of the larger triangle is 14. And so the long leg of the longer triangle is 14 square root of 3. Now, again, area is base times height. Our base is 14 square root of 3. Our height is 14. Divide that by 2. Get 196 square root of 3 over 2, which is 98 square root of 3, which is about 169.7 meters squared. Again, don't forget those units. We're taking area, so it's a square unit. All right, so let's look at this problem. We have a yield sign. We want to find the area of that yield sign. We know a yield sign is an equilateral triangle. So we know these other side lengths are 36 inches. Okay. And so to find the area, we need to know the height of this yield sign. So we cut that in half, making this 12 and 12. Okay. The height is the long side of both of these triangles, which is x times the square root of 3. So the height is 12 square root of 3. I don't know why I put 12. Y'all was just going to let me do it. It's 18. So that's 18 square root of 3. Okay. Then our base is 36. So you have 18 times 36 divided by 2, which is 324 times the square root of 3, which is about 561.18 inches squared. All right, so since this is a real life problem, it's not practical to leave it in simplest radical form, so we can find what the measurement is about. So it's 561.18. Now, in other problems that aren't real life, we should be used to seeing it this way, but we need to know how to do it both ways. All right, so we have a truck on a ramp. All right, we want to find the height of the ramp. If the tipping angle is 30 degrees, and then the height of the ramp when the tipping angle is 45 degrees. Okay, so if it's 30 degrees, all right, we know this height, or we know that the hypotenuse is 80. Okay, So the height of the ramp would be across from this 30-degree angle, which is the shortest angle. So that would be half of the hypotenuse. So that would simply be 40 feet. Okay. Now on a 45, 45, 90 triangle, it's at 45 degrees, which this is still 80. Both of these are the same. Remember, if we know the hypotenuse of the 45, 45, 90 triangle, we can just take that number and divide by the square root of 2, because it equals x times the square root of 2. So 80 divided by the square root of 2 equals x. Rationalize. Multiply top and bottom by the square root of 2. So you get the 80 square root of 2 over 2, which is 40 square root of 2, which is about 56.57 feet. All right, so take a moment to try these last two examples, and I shall return. All right, so we have a recycle bin logo, which is an equilateral triangle. The side lengths are 6. And we need to find the area. So again, we need to define the height of this triangle. The height is the long leg of both of these triangles. So we divide it in half. Both of those pieces are 3. So the height is x times the square root of 3, or 3 square root of 3. So base times height, our base is 6. Our height is 3 square root of 3, all divided by 2, which would be 9 square root of 3, which is about 15.59 centimeters squared. All right, the last problem. The body of a dump truck is raised to empty sand. The height is 15. I'm tripping. The bed is 14 feet long, and it is raised or tipped at a 60-degree angle. How high is the truck? So we know that the hypotenuse is 14. We need to find our long leg. All right, so the short leg is half of the hypotenuse, so that's 7. And then our long leg is the short leg times the square root of 3. All right, so 7 square root of 3, which is about 12.12 feet, 12.12 feet. Okay, so make sure you got all the notes. If you need to rewind and go over it again, please do so. Do the summary at the bottom of your notes, and I will see you in class.